For example, many areas are without power. This is the Marusha waterfall, which is a popular tourist attraction. As you can see, it has completely frozen over. While in Russia, temperatures are below minus 40 degrees Celsius. 2 people have died in Moscow and nearly 200 others are in hospital after suffering from severe hypothermia. And charities are concerned for refugees crossing the continent on foot and informal settlements. There are 2,000 of them in the Serbian capital Belgrade, where temperatures are down to minus 20. Well, our central correspondent in Europe, Nick Thorpe, has more.
Strange scenes in Istanbul. The 4th consecutive day of snow here has closed the Bosphorus to shipping and given the city's ferry operators alternative work. Traffic on another major waterway, the Danube, has also been suspended because of ice flows in Serbia, Romania and Bulgaria. In the major Romanian port city of Constanța, the Black Sea has frozen far out from the shore. Most affected by the cold are the poor in each country. The homeless and migrants have been particularly hard hit. In this abandoned Belgrade warehouse, several hundred migrants and refugees have been living for months. These are the latest pictures from what was once called the Balkan route.
Yeah, actually the cold is too much, and last night we didn't sleep. We all the people sitting around the fire, and it was too cold. I think it was minus 16, 15 last night. And until now we are here because the situation is too bad and snow is falling outside.
There are 13 official refugee centres in Serbia with around 7,000 temporary residents. Hungary is only allowing in 100 a week. Those near the top of the list wait here, in this informal camp at Horgosh, beside the fence. Hungarian police and soldiers patrol on the far side. Meanwhile, in Italy, there are Christmas card scenes a little after the event. Only a few years ago, such images were commonplace in January across Europe. But after 5 years of global warming, many people had forgotten how hard a real winter can be. Nick Thorpe, BBC News.
Turkey's parliament has begun debating controversial changes to the constitution that would hugely increase the power of President Erdogan. He says they're needed to maintain stability. The opposition accused the government of trying to introduce a totalitarian regime. Well, the changes would give President Erdogan the power to appoint his government and declare states of emergency. They would also mean President Erdogan could serve 2 5-year terms, potentially keeping him in power until 2029. He would also have more say over the country's finances and budgets. Well, let's speak to Ozge Ozdemir from the BBC's Turkish service about this. Good to see you, Ozge. As I mentioned, those proposals still need to go through Parliament twice and then to a public vote. How likely is that?
The process will be long for 2 weeks, but it can be prolonged because the main opposition party, CHP, is saying that they are going to be making some oppositions against the changes for the constitution. So in 2 weeks, I guess, the parliament will be discussing about the changes to the constitution.
Now, 2016 was one of the bloodiest years for Turkey in recent memory. President Erdogan would argue that the country needs a very strong leader in order to combat these threats against terrorism. What do your average Turks think about that argument?
Justice and Development Party is saying that this change to the constitution will be bringing more stability. So the people who are going to be, if the constitution changes will be passing the parliament, there will be a referendum. So the people will be voting for the constitution and they will be saying yes or no. So the people will be thinking more about it, about whether supporting Justice and Development Party. So they will be thinking about that when they go to the polls.
Because surely there would be some in the country that would say President Erdogan has promised to crack down and tighten security, and with all the attacks, the string of attacks would continue to happen in the country. That hasn't happened yet.
For example, you have also said that in 2016 and in the past year we have also seen attempted coup. So, for example, now the president is elected in Turkey. Beforehand, there were not elections for the president. So right now, Justice and Development Party is saying that so the president will be more powerful, the system will be more powerful, and democracy will be more powerful. So the terrorist attacks or attempts for the coup d'etat will be less in the future of Turkey.
So does this debate about the constitution have anything to do with that failed coup? We've seen a huge huge purge in many sectors across the country recently.
AKP actually has been debating about this change to the constitution for so long, even before the attempt to coup d'etat. But for sure, after the coup d'etat and after these terrorist attacks, they will be saying that this change will be strengthening the government and the system in Turkey.
Özge, thank you very much for the update. That's Özge Özdemir from the BBC's Turkish service. Thanks very much. Now it's time to have a look at some of the day's other news. And Russia has called accusation by US intelligence agencies that it ran a program of cyber hacking to influence the American presidential election as groundless and amateurish. The Kremlin said the accusations resembled a witch hunt, and that's a word that Donald Trump has also used. A new US intelligence report between the risks of conflict within countries will increase over the next 5 years to levels not seen since the Cold War. Analysts say the slow growth, along with the use of greater technology in jobs markets, will threaten poverty reduction and drive tensions within countries for years to come, leading to nationalism. Talks on reunification between the Turkish and Greek sides in Cyprus have begun in Geneva. The UN-backed negotiations are seen as the best chance in a decade to end the 42-year division in the Mediterranean island. Well, Donald Trump appears to have stolen the headlines from the Golden Globe Awards. He's called Meryl Streep overrated. The actress has accused Mr. Trump of divisive rhetoric at last night's awards in California, from where James Cook reports.
Yet again, Hollywood has been invaded by British acting royalty. In film and in television, stars from the UK are wowing audiences and impressing critics. And what could be more British than playing the Queen?
She has been at the centre of the world for the past 63 years, and I think the world could do with a few more women at the centre of it, if you ask me.
There were 3 awards for the cast of BBC co-production The Night Manager. Its star Tom Hiddleston told us he couldn't believe it.
I did not expect to win a Golden Globe tonight, and I was sat next to Hugh Laurie when he won. I thought, well, I can go home happy. And then when it came to my category, I'm up against some real legends.
Olivia Colman, The Night Manager.
Another British winner was absent. Olivia Colman is preparing to start work on a new film, but Hugh Laurie was there to pick up his award from the Hollywood Foreign Press Association with a dig at Donald Trump.
I suppose made more amazing by the fact that I'll be able to say I won this at the last ever Golden Globes. I don't mean to be gloomy, it's just that it has the words Hollywood Foreign and Press in the title. I just don't know what...
Receiving a Lifetime Achievement Award, Meryl Streep also lambasted the president-elect.
Disrespect invites disrespect. Violence incites violence. When the powerful use their position to bully others, we all lose.
In the most predictable of plot twists, Donald Trump responded on Twitter. Meryl Streep was one of the most overrated actresses in Hollywood, he said, calling the 3-time Oscar winner a Hillary flunky who lost big. On the night, though, it was not politics which prevailed, but escapism.
La La Land!
Yeah! La La Land.
There were a record 7 Golden Globes for the old-fashioned musical La La Land, including acting awards for its stars Ryan Gosling and Emma Stone.
This is a film for dreamers, and I think that hope and creativity are 2 of the most important things in the world, and that's what this movie is about.
Well, Hollywood can be fun and frivolous, but it also prides itself on tackling serious subjects. And many stars here on the red carpet are predicting a surge in political films this year, following the most divisive of elections. James Cook, BBC News, at the Golden Globes in Los Angeles.
And of course, it's not just movies. The Golden Globe Awards also recognise achievements in television. And the biggest winner for the night of the small screen was The Night Manager, an adaptation of John le Carré's spy novel, which was co-produced by the BBC. And I'm happy to say joining me live from Los Angeles is the show's executive producer, Stephen Garrett. Good to see you, Stephen. Huge congratulations on the win. I have to admit, I'm only on the first episode of the series, trying to battle about 15 other box sets at the moment. But this is essentially a spy story, isn't it? And not a Cold War one, which we might be used to, but more of a modern take. Do you think the spy genre is having a bit of a renaissance?
I think, I'm not sure it's ever gone away. I mean, as you know, The Night Manager was adapted from a novel by John le Carré, and The Night Manager was his first post-Cold War novel, and so as the godfather of the genre, starting with novels like The Spy Who Came In From the Cold. I think he set the template for everything we've come to know as the quintessential spy story. I think it's something that we slightly kind of taciturn Brits have a worrying talent for, duplicity and reserve. It suits us. But I think the spy story works so well because it's about people who not only have to lie in their public lives, and you might say that's a talent that travels more widely than just the spying profession, but also have to lie to their nearest and dearest. And that makes for very compelling drama. And I don't think that's going to go away. And I think the moral ambiguity that in a way also Le Carré championed way ahead of his time is increasingly something of the zeitgeist. So I think we're seeing a renaissance, and we'll go on seeing renaissances of spy stories. They're fabulous, fun to watch and fun to make.
Stephen, as I say, huge congratulations on the many wins at the Golden Globes there. That's Stephen Garrett, the executive producer of The Night Manager, who had a slew of awards, including acting gongs for Tom Hiddleston and also Hugh Laurie for The Night Manager. Now, in the last hour, the US media has been reporting that Donald Trump has appointed his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, as a senior advisor to the White House. Well, Anthony Zurcher joins us now from Washington. Good to see you, Anthony. I guess the obvious question is, how legal is this?
Well, that is the big question right now. There are laws against nepotism that date back to the 1960s that say that you can't appoint members of your family, and that includes son-in-laws, to government positions. Now, the reports are coming out that the Trump campaign's or Trump administration's lawyers have come up with a workaround. They could maybe look at parse the language of this law that talks about appointing to an agency and say, well, the White House isn't a government agency, therefore they're not covered by this. And then there was an even more kind of outlandish proposal suggested by Newt Gingrich that Donald Trump appoints Kushner to the position, even in violation of the law, and then just pardons him using the presidential pardon. But it looks like they're going to try to take advantage of this gray area in the law and get him in there. But the reality is that Jared Kushner has had Donald Trump's ear throughout the campaign. For the past year, he's his son-in-law married to Ivanka Trump, and whether or not he had an official position within the administration, he was going to be looking to him for advice as president.
You're quite right. We often see him by Mr. Trump's side in many of these meetings he's been having recently. I just want to ask why that is. Why does Mr. Trump want him so bad in his administration? What does he bring to the party?
Oh, well, he's got an interesting background and a lot in common with Donald Trump, honestly. They were both children of real estate developers. Jared Kushner has inherited his father's sprawling real estate empire, much like Donald Trump did. Kushner's is in northern New Jersey. He has ties to the more established political people in Manhattan. So I think Donald Trump feels like he's a go-between between Donald Trump and some of these more establishment figures that Donald Trump wants to curry favor with. But I think the bottom line is that he trusts Kushner and that Kushner stood by him throughout the entire campaign. So he wants to keep him close.
Anthony, thanks very much for the update. That's the BBC's Anthony Zurcher there in Washington with all the latest on the news that Donald Trump is announced that his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, is to be his senior advisor. Now, Northern Ireland's power-sharing agreement is under threat after the most senior Republican politician in government has resigned. Martin McGuinness stepped down as Deputy First Minister after falling out with the First Minister, Arlene Foster. He'd called on her to resign over a controversial energy scheme. She's repeatedly refused to do so. Mr. McGuinness's party, Sinn Féin, says early elections will now have to be called to sort out the current impasse. Well, our correspondent Stephen Walker joins us now live from Belfast. Good to see you, Stephen. Just put this in context and explain to our viewers around the world what this means for the Northern Ireland peace process.
Well, essentially what it means, the peace process itself is still intact. What we're talking about tonight is the political process. Basically, Northern Ireland is run by a Northern Ireland executive, which is made up of essentially two parties, DUP, who are are pro-British and Sinn Féin who are pro-Irish. The institutions were set up as a result of the Good Friday Agreement, which was a peace agreement. And the way it operates is it operates under power sharing. So you have a First Minister from one party and a Deputy First Minister from the other party. And the power sharing can't exist unless you have these two people going together. And what has happened tonight is Martin McGuinness, the Deputy First Minister, has resigned. And that basically means that power sharing cannot continue. They have a week to try and sort it out, to try and re-nominate another Deputy First Minister. And then the British Secretary of State in London has a big decision to make. He can then ask for elections, and then there would be new elections to the Northern Ireland Assembly.
Okay, Stephen, say there are new elections. These two parties in the power sharing agreement share power. They are the highest election parties in the land. Say they become, again, the two highest voted for parties. What happens then?
Well, that's highly likely. If you look at the statistics, it's highly possible that both DUP and Sinn Féin could come back again as the top two parties. And technically, you could have a DUP First Minister and a Sinn Féin Deputy First Minister. What it means is that all the problems we were talking about, the energy scheme, the investigation, they haven't gone away. They then have to sit down and try and come up with some kind of system to try and sort out this current political mess. And whilst an election means new people would be elected to that assembly, it means that the old problems simply haven't gone away.
Stephen, thanks very much for the update. That's Stephen Walker live in Belfast. A political mess is what he's calling the situation in Northern Ireland. Now, a fund for the family of the Polish truck driver killed in the Berlin Christmas market attack has reached nearly $240,000. Fellow lorry driver David Duncan was so shocked by what happened that he set up the online campaign. And today, Mr. Duncan was personally thanked by the Polish ambassador to London, as Kasia Madeira now reports.
When Dave Duncan heard about Łukasz Urban's killing in the attack on the Christmas market in Berlin, he felt compelled to help the deceased man's family in some way. So he set up an online fundraising campaign to raise money.
It was just something I'd seen on the TV or something and thought, why not? You know, why not me? You know, it's actions speak louder than words, so to speak, so they say. So that's why I did it, yeah.
Are you surprised by the response?
Oh yeah, obviously, yeah. It's been incredible. It's absolutely amazing, the people who responded to it, yeah. It's been brilliant.
The campaign has been welcomed by Mr. Urban's family and the wider Polish community.
Please accept my gratitude for your remarkable gesture. Thank you very much. Thank you.
And today, the Polish ambassador Arkady Żegocki met up with Mr. Duncan to express his thanks.
Some Polish products, just for you.
The money raised by Mr. Duncan will go to Łukasz Urban's widow and teenage son, and he hopes to visit them in Poland in the not-too-distant future. Kasia Madeira, BBC News, at the Polish Embassy in London.
Now, if you're anything like me, you'll do just about anything to get out of going to the dentist, but pretty soon we might not have to get into that chair quite so often. Scientists say teeth can be encouraged to repair themselves, meaning potentially an end to fillings. Well, Professor Paul Sharp is the lead researcher from King's College here in London. He joins us now from just outside of London. Good to see you, Professor. If you'd just be so good as to explain just how this works.
We insert a small sponge that's soaked in a drug into the cavity in the tooth that's prepared in the normal way by a dentist, and the drug on the sponge stimulates the stem cells within the tooth to begin to repair the damage. In specifically, that means making new mineralized tissue called dentine.
And so at the moment, as I understand it, the drug can only help heal very small cavities. So in the future, will they be able to repair potentially larger holes and maybe even regrow teeth entirely?
Well, it can repair large cavities. What it does is it enhances a natural process that itself can only repair small lesions. When we add the drug, it enhances that process, and so we're able to naturally repair large lesions. So the tooth is stimulated to repair itself. That's not really related to completely growing a new tooth. This is a specific process which is to do with dental decay and trauma, where you get damage to teeth.
And I understand that the research is basically at the stage of mice at the moment. So how long do you think it might be between potentially you and I benefiting from this?
Well, we have quite a few additional things to do. As you might imagine, mice teeth are very small. So the damage is small that's repaired. So we have to look at how we can scale up to the equivalent size of a human tooth. Once that's done, then hopefully we'll be in a position to start thinking and preparing for to test this in patients.
And I mentioned a little bit tongue-in-cheek there that we might not have to go to the dentist quite so often. Is there some element of truth in that? I ask because how common is fillings, and is that one of the key reasons why people have to go to the dentist?
It certainly is, and they are very common. And there is some element of truth in that, because we think that because this process restores the normal structure of the tooth rather than having something artificial put in, such as a filling or a cement of some kind, then there's less chance for failure in the future. And of course, conventional fillings do fail, and that means you have to go back to the dentist, as this system essentially recreates the normal tooth structure.
Professor Sharp, thank you very much for all of that interesting detail. That's Professor Paul Sharp, who led the study into regrowing teeth and a new potential future for dentistry there. Now, divorce can often be painfully long and drawn out as a process. But in India, a Muslim practice grants men instant divorce if they say talaq, meaning divorce, 3 times. If that happens, then it can be known as a triple talaq, and it's completely legal, but it's now facing a strong challenge at India's highest court, which could declare the practice unconstitutional. Yogita Lamai has this report from Mumbai.
3 words changed her life forever. Shavista Sheikh says her husband divorced her during a phone call by simply saying, talaq, talaq, talaq. She was pregnant at the time. Her son is now 4 years old, and she's been doing odd jobs to make ends meet.
Men think they can say the 3 words and shake off all responsibility, but they don't stop to think that someone's life is being destroyed with those words.
In India, different religious groups are allowed to have their own rules governing personal affairs, including marriage and divorce. That's why, for Muslim men in this country, so-called triple talaq is perfectly legal. It is, though, a practice that's banned across much of the Islamic world.
But it is being challenged in India now. Women affected by triple talaq from across the country are at this meeting. One by one, they describe how their world fell apart in an instant, losing not just a marriage, but also the means to support their children. This group has asked India's highest court to ban the practice.
All of this is not sanctioned by the Quran, and it is not sanctioned by the Constitution of India also. So we are demanding our Quranic rights.
It's a move supported by India's government. But with its Hindu nationalist links, minority groups are often wary of its intentions. There's strong opposition from some prominent Muslim bodies.
Triple talaq is a part of our religious belief. There is no compromise as far as the religious laws are concerned. These are not negotiable. The Islam is for the people who have the faith in it. If you have the faith in it, you follow the religion. If you don't have the faith in it, who is asking you to follow the religion?
India's constitution gives people the right to freely practice any religion. But it also guarantees gender equality. The court will now have to decide which is more important. Yogita Lamai, BBC News, Mumbai.
Now, one of the world's most challenging dog sled races has kicked off in the Alps. Set amongst the snow-capped mountains near the Savoie region of France, the Great Odyssey Challenge sees riders and their dogs travel 1,000 kilometres in just 11 days. Contestants from 7 countries are taking place in the race. The winner will be crowned on January the 18th. Look at that, flying down the hill there. Braver than me, I'd say. Now, a reminder of our main news. Extreme weather in Europe has left 30 people dead. The conditions have caused big disruptions, while aid agencies have warned of the dangers faced by thousands of vulnerable people across the continent. And in Turkey, protests are occurring as the country's parliament debates constitutional changes that will give President Erdogan much more powers. Opponents say it'll turn a democratic system into a totalitarian regime. Well, that's all from the programme. Stick around next for the weather. But from me and the team, it's a very goodbye. Stick around and stay with me on Twitter. I'm @TomDonkin, BBC. Goodbye for now.